Hello everybody and welcome back to another Addicted Fishing tutorial. Today we're talking about one of my absolute favorite ways of fishing and catching salmon in particular, and it's with spinners. So if you guys want to learn more about how to catch Chinook salmon with spinners, stay tuned. It's coming at you right now. So to get today's video kicked off, if you guys have never seen any of our tutorials before, we have tons of great spinner tutorials for steelhead, salmon, and trout on our page here at Addicted Fishing. So check out some of the links in the description. Let's get this video started. We're gonna start with first talking about our rod selection for this kind of fishing. It's very imperative to have the right rod for spinner fishing because it's a very sensitivity driven style of fishing. You wanna be able to feel bottom, you wanna be able to feel the thump of your blade, and you wanna be able to tell when that fish grabs it so that you're setting hook properly. The rod I like to use most is what I have here in my hands, the Okuma X Rod series, either in the 9.3 medium heavy action, or what I have here is the 9.9 bait caster setup. The 9.3 comes in either a bait caster or the spinning rod, or the Okuma Guide Select Pro is a 9-foot, 8 to 17 pound rod, which works really good for this kind of fishing. If you're gonna be fishing with a spinning setup, which is a great way to start, I'd recommend the C40 Kaimar or any kind of 40 or 30 series reel or 3000 or 4000 series reel, depending on what style of reel you're using or what brand. But I like the C40 Kaimar best because it's very light, it has a great action, and it's very durable and it lasts a long time. For my bait caster reel here, I have a Helios. And what I have on this is a 30-pound braided line. This braided line that I have on here is a high-vis Addicted Enforcer line. It's a really neat fire orange color so that you can see it up on the surface of the water. And that 30-pound rating is very specific here because we want that line diameter small enough that it cuts through the water nicely and allows those spinners to sink even if it's not a super heavy spinner. To the end of that 30-pound braid, I connect a 20-pound piece of fluorocarbon line, about 6 to 10 feet of it. That way I can chop my stuff down and keep taking my spinners off and adding new spinners. And at the end of that fluorocarbon bumper, you'll notice I have my spinner here without a snap swivel. I don't like using the snap swivels as much. A lot of spinners these days, especially the R&Bs and some of the aftermarket brands, come with a swivel built into the tip, and those are fine, but I don't like particularly the snap swivel setup that classically a lot of people have used while spinner fishing. The reason for not having that is because, which I'll explain more as we start fishing this today, is I want my blade to start spinning the second that it hits the water. And when I have a barrel swivel with a chain through it that is always spinning, it counteracts the spin of that blade. So you have to get the barrel swivel spinning and then the blade spinning in order to get the proper action and get your spinner down in the zone. But when you eliminate that snap swivel, that spinner blade starts spinning the minute it hits the water until the time that you start to reel it in, and it engages very easily so that you can constantly be fishing. Now let's go over some spinner types. I'm going to show you 3 different styles of spinners, and then we're going to go out in the river and fish those spinners in 3 different styles of water, which are very necessary for each style of spinner to each style of water, which you'll learn more about here in just a second. So what we have from left to right here, we have Blue Fox spinners, we have an R&B style torpedo body, we have a steelhead slammer torpedo body, and we have the Northwest Extreme Outfitter bullet bodies, which are very heavy. This is about a 1/2 ounce spinner. This one's about a 1/4 ounce. And these ones are about a 1/2 to an 1/8 ounce. And so using those different weights of spinners and different styles of spinners in different water is going to be crucial for being successful in that style of water. The bell body is something I want to use in a lot shallower water. It has a lot of surface area, it's lighter, and it's hard to get down in deep water. So therefore, I'm going to fish it in faster, boldier water because it's going to be able to fish slower behind certain techniques. And I'm going to want that bell body in that shallower water because it sits higher up in the water column and it can fish slower because of that surface area in shallower water rather than a heavy spinner or a torpedo body that cuts through the water quickly and doesn't give that same presentation. So the bell body I like to use anywhere in between 6 inches to about 3 foot of water. Now to the torpedo bodies. The torpedo body is a much more versatile all-around spinner. I like to use it anywhere from about 3 to 10 feet of depth because of the way that that body cuts through the water. It's much more aerodynamic or hydrodynamic than the bell body because, as you can see, there's a lot less surface area and there's a little bit more weight to it. So this thing cuts through the water better, it swings nicely through boulder gardens and tailouts, and it gets down and deep in places that I want it to. So the range of water I want to fish the torpedo bodies are anywhere from about 4 feet down to about 10 feet. Now moving on to the bullet body. The bullet body spinners here by Northwest Extreme Outfitters are very good to use in deep, slow water. It's not so much a fast water presentation or any kind of normal riffle or spinner run. This is something I want to use in deep, dark, hard to reach places in the river so that I can get that spinner presentation down to a level in the water column that normally I would never be able to get my spinner to, which we'll show you more about that in just a second. Choosing your spinner color really depends on what kind of water that you're fishing, whether it be dirty water or clear water. I like to leave home with a huge box of spinners every day. I have different sizes, different shapes, and I definitely have different colors. The color range depends on the siltiness of the water. If I'm fishing clear water, I want to fish blues, blacks, and a much more neutral color, something that's not as flamboyant and that doesn't have the potential of actually spooking that fish. It's already a very aggressive presentation, and I don't want to counteract that with a bright color that might ultimately scare those fish in a clear water situation. If I'm fishing any sort of silty or dirty water, I want to go with yellows and pinks and oranges and gold blades and colors that stand out in that turbid water. So fact of the matter is, having multiple different styles of colors and multiple different shapes in your box is imperative to going out and having a lot of success with these spinners. So let's step into the river and show you what kind of water we want to fish each single one of these styles in. So what I have behind me here is an absolutely ideal and perfect spinner run. What I mean by that is we have a walking speed current, we have a ledge through the middle, and we have a ton of structure. We got rocks spaced out about every 10 feet, and there's big boulders all the way down through the river, which gives me a great platform to start fishing the spinner, because the beauty of a spinner is how you can effectively break apart water that you normally couldn't get a good presentation through with any other method, i.e. some kind of rock garden or boulder garden like you see behind me here. I have this nice steady current, and I'm going to start my cast close, middle to far, and that is the most crucial thing that I'll talk about today in this video, is effectively covering water in the place that you're fishing. So I have this right in front of me. I have boulders spaced out. I have that steady current on the far side. I'm going to start my first cast to the middle. I'm going to go far, and then I'm going to take 2 steps down and systematically work my way through the hole from top to bottom. Whether you're in a boat or whether you're in a bank, the movement through the hole is what's imperative to actually work that spinner through and effectively present it to those fish. So let's step in and get this started. The spinner that I've chosen first is the torpedo body, mainly because of the speed of the water and the depth. We have 3 to 6 feet of depth. I have a lot of boulders I need to work around, and I want this thing to get down and fast in behind those boulders each time I'm casting. I wouldn't go with a bell body here because it's not going to sink fast enough, and I wouldn't go with a bullet body because it's too heavy. So the way I'm going to start this is I'm going to cast my first cast halfway across the river at 90 degrees. I'm going to keep my rod tip pointed, and I'm going to immediately engage my spinner. I'm not going to allow that spinner to fall to the bottom right off the bat because it's going to create too big of a belly in my line. I want that thing to hit the water, engage it, and then fish it down to the bottom with my rod tip presentation. And what I mean by that is watch how I control my tip here. I'm going to cast out. I'm going to go further now because that was my second cast. I'm making a direct point of contact in between me and the spinner, and I'm constantly putting my tip directly at my spinner and following it as it goes through the strike zone, because you see that sensitivity. The second that that thing hit the bottom, I could feel it and I could tell. There was no guesswork. And having that non-stretch braided line, that enforcer line, allows me to feel every bit of sensitivity there. I can feel that thump of the blade, I can feel when the blade touches a rock, and I can feel when the whole spinner touches a rock. So now that I've made those 2 casts at 90 degrees, I'm going to take 2 big boy steps downriver. Now that I've made my 2 steps, I'm going to start with my middle cast yet again. So I'm going to go straight to the middle, directly at 90 degrees, engage that spinner immediately. And the thing about controlling the depth of your spinner is using your tip. You either go up and it brings it to the surface, you can see that spinner right up on the surface, or I point it down towards the water and it goes deeper. And using that method of going up and down, depending on whether or not you're hitting bottom, will keep you in the strike zone the whole time. Having your tip low from the beginning, fishing it all the way to the bottom, and then as it starts to touch, slowly rising your tip so that it can pull that spinner up off the bottom, creating tension on your line, will keep you going up and down any sort of structure that you're fishing through. Okay. So I've made my middle cast, I've made my far cast, I'm going to take 2 more steps. Then I'm going to go to the middle again. And having a good pair of glasses and being able to identify the structure out in front of you is going to make you a lot better angler with spinners, because you're going to be able to pinpoint those spots that those fish live. I know there's a big boulder, I know it's a current break for a salmon, it's going to nose up behind it, and I'm going to be able to cast with a pursuit angle, casting just over or just above that rock and slowly swinging it across using my rod tip, again going up and down to control my depth and make sure I'm not snagging and staying in front of that fish. Now the speed you want to be reeling when fishing this torpedo body in a run like this is just dictated off of how deep the water is. So as it's going through there, if I'm doing everything right, I'm keeping my rod tip pointed, I have my direct point of contact, I have a lot of sensitivity in there, I'm going to reel just enough. You can see my tip wiggle in there. I'm going to reel just enough to make sure that I'm not hitting the bottom. If my spinner blade is spinning too fast, you can see my tip going really fast as I spin, that's gonna be too quick, and that's not gonna be down in front of those fish. It's gonna be pulling you up out of the strike zone. So just counteracting your reel enough to counteract the current speed as well as the drag on your line is what's gonna keep you in that strike zone. So reeling just enough to get that tension on your line, you can feel that thump and allow yourself to swing, and then use again the tension of your rod tip up and down to control your depth. That'll keep you in that zone all the time. There's times like here where I've cast it a little bit more at a 45-degree angle where my spinner blade is fishing and fishing perfectly through there, and I'm not even reeling. So I'm letting it go through the zone. It's fluttering, I know it's not on bottom, I know I'm getting a good presentation, and I just reel just enough to make sure that spinner blade keeps spinning. One thing I want to show you guys here, and especially with these torpedo bodies, is the actual motion of the blade that you want. You don't want a very fast repetition when it comes to salmon and steelhead. That aggressive blade speed doesn't exactly do anything for the aggressiveness of the fish. A slower blade speed puts off more light, as you watch here. As this thing just barely lopes and it barely spins, look how much light comes off of that. If I reel that thing fast, look at how little light comes off of it. Okay, now that we've touched on all the basis on how to fish that perfect spinner water, that 3 to 6 foot, let's go grab a bullet body and start fishing a deep hole. Okay, now we're in bullet body country. We moved downriver into a big deep salmon hole, one that is way more typical for springers to be in. They like that shallow fast water like we fished a minute ago with that torpedo body, but these big deep roily holes are really the best spots for these things. They have moving water, which is carrying oxygen, and they have deep water, which is cold. So that's an ideal situation for a spring Chinook. What we have here is a nice fast riffle coming to the top, drops out to about 10 and buckets out at about 15 feet. So that's why I'm going with such a heavy spinner, and the way I'm gonna fish it is gonna be a lot different. I'm in the boat this time, but you could be on the bank. But the way I'm gonna start this is I'm gonna start my cast up into the riffle, fishing that shallow shelf and fishing this drop off in front of me. So I'm gonna start my first cast about 45 degrees upriver, and I'm gonna let this spinner sink all the way down, slowly reeling until I see that thing hit bottom. Thump, 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 which is not necessarily what I would typically encourage when you're spinner fishing. I don't want you to wait for that thing to sink and fall. But in this case, even though we have a half-ounce spinner, we still need that thing to get down in that zone, which it won't if we just start reeling right off the bat. So my next cast I'm gonna make about 10 feet further downriver, and with this presentation, I'm working that far side of the river so that I can get that swing through that deep hole. We're not so much pinpointing one single boulder or one single ledge. I want this spinner to just kind of be freely drifting through the middle of that hole so that those fish can see it from a distance and have the opportunity to swim over and grab it. So I want this thing fishing in the hole for as long as possible. But the best way to fish this is once you start casting more at 45 and 90, this thing's gonna fall, 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 and you need to engage that spinner blade by either reeling fast for just a second or giving a little whip with your tip and actually pulling against that thing, and you'll start to feel that resistance of that blade and that thump of that spinner, and that way you know it's down there and working. So I'm gonna keep working my way down about 10 feet at a time, and as I start coming across to this 90-degree angle, I'm really gonna give this thing time to get to the bottom. Bam, there's bottom there. I'm gonna reel fast, get my blade going, and then I'm gonna instantly slow it down and just make sure that that blade is spinning as it comes through the strike zone there. You don't wanna reel it too fast as it comes back, and you don't wanna reel it too slow, because in that stagnant boily water, that boily water will counteract the spin of your blade, and a lot of times that blade will just lay flat as you reel in and won't start spinning at all. And what you'll feel there is nothing. You won't feel that resistance and you won't feel that thump. So in that case, just start reeling faster. Okay, so now that I've crossed 90 degrees, I'm casting at 45. I'm actually gonna dump a little bit of line. I'm gonna make sure that thing makes it all the way down to the bottom. I'm gonna snap that, and at this point, because I have that current, and you see my rod tip movement, I don't need to reel at all. That thing's down deep, it's about 8 to 10 feet under the surface. The current's pulling against my line tension enough that it's keeping that blade spinning, and I'm just slowly letting it swing through the bottom end of that tail out. And that can sometimes be the most crucial way of fishing these. Letting that line get tight, letting that current pull, and again, letting that thing sit down there in the strike zone and just piss those fish off will always attract more bites than just casting and retrieving in. So let's try that one more time. I'm gonna show you guys. Cast about 45 degrees downriver. I'm gonna let this thing sink all the way to the bottom. Same thing, rod tip high, keeping my line tight to where I can see that thing hit, thump, there it is. I'm gonna reel it tight, get the blade spinning, and then just let that thing work. And it's swirling around down there. I can still feel it pulling. If I don't feel it pulling, I'm gonna reel 2 or 3 times till I feel that thud, till I feel that thump of that blade. And I'm just gonna slowly reel, making sure that that blade's spinning, and bring it right back to me here. One thing that never hurts also, a lot of times when I'm fishing these big bullet blades and I'm fishing in a deep hole like this, I like to fish from the top all the way down to the bottom, but do not ever hesitate to cast straight all the way back up river. Sometimes with Chinook, that straight downriver presentation where that spinner comes right into their face can be the most effective, especially after you've already fished a hole. The main difference when you're making that straight downriver presentation though, is that you have to keep that blade spinning. As that downriver current counteracts that blade spin, it'll keep that blade from actually going in full rotations. So I'm gonna let that sink. There's bottom, and I'm actually gonna reel a lot faster than I've been recommending this whole time. But you're bringing that thing straight down into those fish's face, you're not giving them long to look at it, and you're just getting a totally different look in a deep salmon hole just like this. All right, now that we've covered a big boily salmon hole with the bullet body, let's grab our bell body and let's go hit some fast water. All right, everybody, so the third and final style of water and style of spinner we're gonna talk about is the bell body and the shallow fast water. One of my probably top favorite ways to fish for these fish are in these shallow flats like this. In the summer months when it gets really hot and in some areas the water gets nice and dirty, these fish will survive and they'll live in these shallow areas because of the disturbance of the water creating a lot of oxygen. They'll sacrifice that cold water to be able to breathe in that low oxygenated warmer water. So spots like this can be an awesome spot to pinpoint and actually pull out some of the biggest fish you'll ever catch in your life. So I have the number 5 bell body blue fox on here, and I'm gonna use this, and you're gonna see the difference right away in between using a bullet body spinner or a torpedo body and using this bell body in this kind of water. This thing has a lot of surface area, it catches a lot of current, and in that case, it doesn't really sink. That way I can fish in behind these shallow pockets without getting snagged instantly every time. So let's get this started. So what I have out here in front of me is an absolute maze of boulders. I see pockets here, pockets there, and main currents coming down in 3 or 4 different spots. What I first want to identify when doing this is where is the deepest channels and where is the seams in this spot. Where is the spot where those fish can sit and hide behind a boulder without any sort of predator or any sort of threat coming at them or causing them to move. So I can see out here in front of me, I have 2 or 3 main seams of deep dark water, and I'm basically gonna pinpoint those. When you're fishing this way, it doesn't really matter as much if you're casting up or downriver, as long as you're getting that presentation and your pursuit angle's correct. So I'm gonna cast behind that boulder, fish 10 feet behind it, and then reel it in. This isn't a long, drawn out swing. I'm gonna be pinpointing pockets in this water and trying to get in front of those fish that might be there. So as we get started here, I see this little breaking wave and a nice dark seam right behind it. I'm gonna throw that out there. I'm gonna immediately get that spinner's blade spinning. I'm gonna keep my rod tip high, and I'm just gonna work it through that small little seam and that small little window of opportunity that I have. And now look at this, look how slowly I'm reeling and how little pressure I'm putting on that spinner, and that thing is still not getting snagged. It's only about 6 to 8 inches deep out there. But because of that surface area on that spinner, and because of all that turbulence pushing up off the bottom of the river, it's keeping that spinner from sinking and going in between the rocks. So I got that little point done, and this is a very pinpoint accuracy type of fishing. I'm gonna cast twice behind that rock. I'm gonna cast twice behind this rock. I'm gonna cast twice behind this one, and I'm gonna consistently move until I'm through this entire boulder field and have it all covered. So I made that first cast up. I'm gonna go straight out this time. Keeping that rod tip high, pointing that tip right at that spinner so you can immediately feel that sensitivity. I'm not pointing my tip down because I don't want this thing to sink. If I point that down, it's going to go into the rocks. If I keep my tip up, I can control that and let it flutter around each one of those boulder patches. There we go. We keep that tip nice and high, swinging it right through ever so slightly. Now that I've covered those 3 boulders in front of me, I'm gonna move downriver. Okay, now I'm in a whole new maze. I have 2 slots in front of me that are deep and dark and 1 on that far side. So my first cast, it's gonna be nice and close. I'm gonna keep that rod tip slightly up at a 45, keep that spinner moving through that strike zone, and then bring it in. Then I'm gonna go to my next rock, cast behind it, keep that rod tip high, keep that spinner moving right through that zone, and then I'm gonna bring it back in. And I'm gonna go so on and so forth all the way across the river. I'm gonna go to this far boulder, get right behind it, fish through that dark pocket, right through that area where that fish could be, and then I'm gonna move on. And the nice part about spinner fishing in shallow water like this is normally if there's an aggressive fish there and you get it in front of him, he's not gonna have a choice but to bite. The way this thing is working is it's fluttering through and all of a sudden that fish is sitting there looking at a rock and then wham, spinner right in his face. And that's what makes them bite. It's not so much that they're hungry or that they're really trying to chase or eat the spinner. It's that aggressive presentation entices them to be aggressive back and smack it out of the way. Basically, they're just defending themselves in a way. So let's move on down one more time. Okay, we move downriver another 20 or 30 yards. I'm gonna go out mid-river, get behind the big boulder I have here in front of me, and work it down through. Oh, not the big one we were hoping for, but a nice little trout nonetheless. Come on over here, little guy. Little hatchery smolt there, but you guys get the idea. Using this bell body spinner with this large surface area and fishing it through these shallow, fast riffles can be one of the most effective ways to target fish when it gets hot out or any time of year that there's Chinook in the river. All right, everybody, we hope those tips and techniques help you go out on the water and have more fun chasing these amazing creatures that are Chinook salmon. If you guys want to see more awesome salmon tutorials just like this one, go up here and click this link to this next video. Go down here, hit subscribe, turn your bells on, give this video a thumbs up, and comment below, and you could be the comment of the day just like this person right here. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. You stay fishy. We'll see you out there.